Awesome.
Hello and welcome to the channel. I have a super special guest today. Not only is she a best-selling author, not only is she a super success on YouTube, but she is the inspiration or one of the inspirations for me getting started. The cyborg queen herself, Jenna Moreci. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And the cyborg princess is here as well. So if you hear
Buttercup.
if you hear any licking noises, that's her. Nothing weird is going on over here. It's just her giving kisses.
Excellent. Yeah, so I like to ask all authors this question because, most authors were readers when they grew up.
Mhm.
Who got you into reading, and what was the first book that you remember purposely picking up that was fantasy related?
That's kind of that's the same answer pretty much. But I remember I was a reader ever since I could read. I was really, really into reading, obviously. But the one book that I felt was like a turning point for me was Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine, which is, people are always surprised by that because what I write is significantly darker than Ella Enchanted. But I'm one of those people, maybe it's the autism, I don't know, but I'm one of those people that when I read, I can't help, ever since I was a little kid, I can't help but kind of pick it apart and be like, well, if I wrote it, I would have, done this. And even when I was a little kid, it was the littlest things like, oh, well, if I wrote it, she would have had brown hair and not blonde hair. I always had something to nitpick. And when I read Ella Enchanted, that was the first book, and I was like in the 4th grade. That was the first book where I just totally got 100% invested and immersed and thought everything was perfect and that it was the most incredible thing that I'd ever read. And after I read it, like I experienced what a lot of readers call like the book hangover, where it's like nothing ever
Nothing can equal it.
Exactly. And I just remember thinking, this is how I want to make people feel when they read my books. I just want them to be completely sucked in. I remember at one point my mom needed to like run some errands and it was late, like the sun was setting, and I was reading in the car and I made her leave the light on. I was like, I need to finish. I need to finish. Right. So that for me was, I guess, a turning point, because I've wanted to be a writer since I was 6. So once I read that book, I was like, this is the goal. This is how I want to make people feel.
So I guess my next question is, tell us about Funeral. What?
That's some deep lore right there.
What's the story about? What's the history behind it?
Okay, so when I was in the 1st grade, we would devote 1 day a week to writing our very own books, and we would illustrate them and bind them with construction paper. And this is what got me like, I'm going to be a writer. Like, this is it. This is the dream. And I made a list of books that I was going to write. And I was like, which one am I going to write first? I know, I'll write The Funeral. And I wish that I could. So it's about a little cat, a little kitten who learns that his uncle, who's a cat, has died. But the mom's like, but good news, we get to go to the funeral. And they're like, yay! And they're so excited to go. I wish that I had an explanation for this. But like literally my teacher apparently pulled my mom aside. She's like, did someone die recently? Is Jenna struggling to cope? No one died. I just did not understand. I thought a funeral was like being invited to a wedding, like it's a party. I didn't get it. I have no excuse, but it does make sense that I'm still writing about dead people. They're not cats anymore. So at least there's that.
It makes perfect sense. Like it was foreshadowing all along.
Exactly. I was just preparing people for
the future.
Yeah.
So like, when did you start like getting like serious about like, oh, I'm gonna start writing. I'm gonna be a writer. We're gonna work our way. And who kind of was the first to tell you, you got something here? You got a gift?
Well, pretty much since the funeral, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I was 6. I was like, I'm going to be a writer. Right. Clearly, this funeral story is a bestseller. Like, I'm just going to keep going. So I was writing stories in like little notebooks, all throughout elementary school, all throughout middle school. I had a 4th grade teacher who told me that I was, my writing level was ahead of my peers. And she was like, you could be a published author someday. And that was something that teachers would repeatedly tell me, well, like all throughout high school and everything. And in college, I had English teachers professors who were like, you're really good at this. You should consider it for a career. But at the same time, and I'm not saying this to be a hater toward my family, but they're over here like, maybe you should pursue a real job. Like this is writing, is not going to make you any money. It was that sort of mentality. So by the time I got to college, I had sort of abandoned the dream of being a writer. It was just something fun I was doing on the side, but I was like, I'm never going to make it a career. And it wasn't until I graduated college and I was working as a stockbroker, which is so similar to writing.
Yeah, can't tell them a difference.
Pretty much the same exact thing. So I was working as a stockbroker, and I just remember coming home one day after work, because miserable, just had been hating my job for a couple years, and I just remember thinking, like, this is it. Like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm going to spend 40 hours a week hating my life, and then live for the evenings and weekends. I don't think I can do this. So I started looking for other jobs, but they were all the same brand of finance that I didn't enjoy. So around that time, I was like, I always wanted to be a writer. Maybe I'll try, writing a novel. I have all these ideas, and my goal was to make it like a lucrative hobby, just like a side gig. And, my thought process was, well, at least I tried. Like if it doesn't work out, I know I have an answer that this isn't going to work out for me, but at least I know I tried. And so I would say my first adult supporter was my boyfriend, now husband, Cliff. He started reading what I was writing. And of course, my family was still like, no, this is a stupid idea. Don't do it. But my boyfriend, now husband, was like, this is really good, Jenna. You need to keep going. And he was always like, I'd tell you if it was bad, but it's good. So keep at it. So he was the only person who supported me at the beginning of the journey. And long story short, my first book, I started the YouTube channel, and my first book did well enough where I was able to do that as my job. So now I'm working full-time as an author, and I'm actually make a lot more money as an author than I ever made as a stockbroker. So it just goes to show that you can make writing a career. All those people who said you couldn't do it, it is possible.
Yes. Well, yeah. And I want to say you're coming up on what? You're about to break 2,000 Amazon reviews and over 5,000 Goodreads reviews. I mean, that's for a self-published author, you're killing it on the reviews out there too.
Thank you. Yeah, and the Savior's Champion, I'm constantly sharing this because this is going to be carved into my tombstone. Like it's like my greatest achievement. The Savior's Champion, which is my first romantasy book, it was voted one of the best books of all time by Book Depository. Yeah. And I remember when I found out, I didn't even know that they were doing this award. I had no idea about it until another author was like, Jenna, congratulations. And I'm like,
what?
On what? And she goes, do you not even know? I'm like, no, I don't. And she sent me the link. I'm like, what is this? What's going on? So that I can die happy.
Yeah. That's great when good news just sneaks up on you out of nowhere. Right. You're like, didn't he? Me? Yeah.
It was very exciting.
So when did you decide? Because I think your first book was what, Eve?
Yes.
And that was 2015, I believe. Mm-hmm. So we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary here soon of your first published. So what made you decide? Because you're one of the biggest proponents of self-publishing. When I first decided, like, I had this story that I wrote when I was senior in high school, and I was just threw it away. Well, put it away because got to live life, right? Got to make money. Right. So, and then when I got serious about it, I found your channel immediately. You were like the first, person. And just what made you decide to go self-pub rather than, or did you pursue traditional publishing and just found it not to your liking? Like I just had Philip on, and that was his thing. He's like, it's too slow for me. That was his reason for not doing it.
I didn't pursue traditional publishing. I've actually never pursued any publishers, even with I'm now a hybrid author, and my next nonfiction book is coming out traditional. I still haven't ever had to reach out to a publishing house. They reached out to me. But The reason I chose self-publishing is because I spent years researching both avenues. And so there's a lot of information that goes into this decision. But the biggest thing that like really tipped me over the edge was I interviewed a bunch of authors, some traditionally published, some self-published, and all but two of them, no matter which publishing route they went, they were all jaded and bitter, and they were like, don't do writing. You're not going to make any money. It was just very depressing. They're all like, it's a scam, and you know, no one's going to read your books. I'm like, okay, tell me how you really feel. But there were two writers who were very, very happy, and one was traditional and one was self-pub. And the self-pub author had one book out, and it was performing pretty well. It wasn't well enough for him to quit his day job or anything, but it was performing well enough that if his next two books performed that well, he anticipated that he would be able to write full time. Nice. And he was publishing them quickly because he didn't have to wait through all the traditional process. So he anticipated that his next two books would be out within a year and a half. And if they all performed the same, he would be able to do this as a full-time job. The other author I talked to who was traditional, she was a 65-year-old woman, and she loved the traditional publishing process. She was very happy with it, but she told me that it took 20 years for her to be able to be taken seriously enough by her publishing house that they were finally offering her advances that she could quit her full-time job and do writing full-time. I did not want to wait 20 years to be taken seriously. I mean, by the time they were taking her seriously, she was already at retirement age. So now she just ditched her full-time job for a new full-time job, which was writing. And she was really, really happy about it. And I'm happy for her. But I was like, I can't spend another 20 years as a stockbroker. Excuse me. That's just not, I can't do it. So I went the self-publishing route. And there were other factors as well. I'm very much, I'm hybrid now. I'm very much a proponent of do the route that works best for you. And just because self-publishing works best for me, it doesn't mean it will for everyone. But one of the big things was when I learned what traditional publishing houses offer the average author, a lot of people assume that they're going to get the Stephen King treatment. And unless you're Stephen King, you're not going to, it's not going to happen. I learned that for the average author, you have to do all the marketing yourself. They're not going to market the book for you. In fact, they're going to ask you, like, what marketing do you plan to do before even accepting a contract for you? They want to know what you're bringing to the table. And the way I saw it is if I'm giving them, such a huge amount of my royalties, I want them to market me. I want them to work for me.
Exactly.
And so when I researched what traditional publishers do for their average author, it was all stuff that I had learned in business school. And it was all stuff that I was like, oh, I can figure that out. I know how to do that. So for me, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. I didn't want to be sacrificing so much income for them to do something that I knew I'd be able to do for myself. So that's why I went that route.
Yeah, that's what I hear a lot. And like for myself, it was kind of the, I want to keep control of all my stuff, and I want to get it out there as fast as I want to get it out there. Because I've heard some horror stories of like people basically getting put on the back burner for 2 or 3 years after the book is completely done, and they're just waiting and waiting.
Right.
And it's so funny you're talking about like all the research you did. Like you were part of my research.
That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help people so that they don't have to, go through all the hoops that I had to jump through. It's like, I read all the books. Here's the summary.
Yeah. I think you and your friend, Meg Latour over there, like you two were like who I would bounce back and forth for like publishing advice and how to do everything and what to expect. I think a lot of people are caught off guard who try to go traditional publishing, and they're not expecting like the amount of rejections or not even being acknowledged. And it's like, I remember watching your videos and you're like, this is going to happen. You just have to understand, don't get discouraged. One of your biggest advice is, as I became a writer myself and an author, is like, I understand exactly what you meant when you're like, don't wait for the muse, because if you wait, it's not coming. Like, Can you speak to that? Because I think you say it so perfectly about not waiting around to write.
Yeah, I just feel like if you wait for to be inspired and only write then, you're gonna maybe finish one book in your lifetime. I mean, I know people who they wait for inspiration because they think that's when they're going to create their best work. And it's like, I've been working on this for 10 years and and I only have 70,000 words. And it's like, okay, so you're getting like 20 pages a year. This is ridiculous, you know? Um the fact is that you're going to get tired of your book. You read it so many times, you're going to get tired of it. You're going to have to write scenes that you're not excited to write. If I only wrote what was exciting for me, my books would just be nonstop dialogue and witty banter and kissing, you know, it would be all that stuff. It's like, well, I'm sorry, but sometimes they need to travel, or sometimes I need to write a fight scene that's very difficult. You know, these things need to happen to move the story along. So you're always going to end up writing scenes that you're not excited about. You're going to have days where you don't feel like writing because real life is just being a big pain in the ass. So if you only write when you feel inspired, the book is just not going to get finished. And then, like I said, you're going to get tired of reading it because you've read it so many times. So it's much more reliable to focus on habit instead of inspiration. And that's by habit, I mean, like, make some kind of writing routine. A lot of people think that means write every day. You don't have to write every day. I don't write every day. And this is my full-time job. It's not, sorry, my asthma. It's not a viable option for a lot of people. So it's just about creating a routine that works for you. What I do is I create weekly goals and I'll say, okay, finish XYZ, you know, finish chapters 13 and 14 during this week. And then I fit it in wherever I can during that week. That's my writing routine, especially because I have a very chaotic schedule and I need to be very flexible. So that works best for me. I know some people who every day after work, they write for an hour. That's their routine. And you just do it whether you feel motivated or not. You just create that routine and stick to it.
Yeah, I think that is some of the best advice you can give to especially new aspiring authors, because like, yeah, you'll get the like, oh, I'm just not feeling it. When I do write, I write a whole bunch at once. And I'm like, I'm not even sure if that is the way, like, even if you can like sit down 1 or 2 days a week and write like 3,000 words a day. I'm like, if you're not doing it consistently, I'm not so sure you're getting the best writing out of yourself trying to basically cram. You're like, oh, cram it all in one day, you know? Like,
and then you read it back and it's crap.
Yeah. You're like, well, it's gonna be, the first draft's gonna be bad anyway, but still, you know. But like, you know, I tried, you know, to do, you know, write every day, and it was like, I tell people, it's like, well, if you're really serious about it, try to write every day. Try to do 100 words, right? If you've never wrote before, like, and you'll realize that's pretty easy. And then you could go to 500, and then, you know, I love the way you say you do it. You do like your weekly, you know, so you can kind of track, like, okay, well, maybe I need to pick it up today a little bit, or or I'm doing really well, so I can take a day off and go out to the park or do whatever.
Right.
You know, whereas you got people like Stephen King that you mentioned is like, you know, I think, what's he do, 6 pages a day and then calls it a day, like, you know, and I'm like, you know, if that's all you're doing, you know, but how was publishing your first book? How, like, when, because you did Eve in 2015, was it like crazy trying to figure out all the self-publishing things back then?
Yes, it was a different landscape than it is now. And I remember the night before it went live, I had so many hiccups. I ended up having to pull an all-nighter. And I just remember crying, and I'm not a crier. I'm just sobbing. And my husband, Cliff, is like, it's going to be okay. It's good. I'm like, no, it's not. It comes out tomorrow. And pretty much the whole week of the release, I was just like passed out. I was just like exhausted from it all. And that's actually something that I try. That's one of the reasons why I give advice is like, okay, don't, like, give yourself enough time and wiggle room, because hiccups are going to come up. At this point, I've published, I have to think about it. I published 4 books and I have 3 more on the way. And I've yet to have a release where something
never. Always something happens.
So I'm like, don't do what I did. Don't rush to get it out. Like, give yourself wiggle room for a hiccup, because I had a hiccup the night before it was going to be released, and I was losing my mind. And pretty much the whole week of the release, I was just dead to the world. I was just like, I'm exhausted. I did it. It's out. I'm done. But now each release is much easier. It's not like that anymore. But I do like to warn people that prepare for the first book release to be very, very a scary process, because you're ripping off the Band-Aid. You're getting yourself out there for the very first time. It's going to be nerve-wracking. It's going to, make, it's going to affect you. Whereas now I release a book and it's just like, oh, it's Tuesday, here's a book.
So how did YouTube come about? That has to be an interesting story.
Yeah. I mentioned before that I was working as a stockbroker while I was writing my debut novel. And when I was almost done with the book, my my husband, well, then boyfriend Cliff, he suffered a major accident and broke his spine. And so I quit my job so I could sign on as his full-time caregiver, because he had to relearn to walk and all of that stuff. He had to have physical therapy 3 times a day. And while I was in that process, you can't go through something like that and be like exactly the same person. Yeah. The love of my life almost died. It was really, really wild. And it kind of changes your perspective on things. And one of the things that it taught me is that our life is not guaranteed. Like, tomorrow is not guaranteed. You could drop dead at any moment. And I didn't really want to waste any more time. And I was kind of over being, I guess, like scared and insecure. Like, I developed a fuck it mentality, basically. I hope that's okay for me to say. But yeah, so I developed a like, fuck it, I'll give it a shot kind of mentality. And for years before he broke his spine, I had a blog where I was trying to promote myself as a writer. And I was giving writing advice, and people said the blog was really funny. And people who knew me personally was like, why are you doing a blog and not a YouTube channel? You have the personality for YouTube. You've got a good sense of humor, and you can combine it with the writing advice and give writing advice in a funny way. And people have been telling me this for years. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. Because, I'm an introvert. I don't want to talk in front of all these strangers on the internet. I was scared. But then Cliff broke his spine. I developed the fuck it mentality, and I didn't really enjoy blogging. I like writing fiction. I didn't want to just give advice on Tumblr to people. So I said, fuck it, I'll give it a shot. My goal was to get 100 subscribers. I was like, if I got 100 subscribers, I won. And so I started the YouTube channel. Cliff, like in the very early videos, I was filming on a couch, and Cliff was on the love seat. You can't see him. He's not in frame, but he's on the love seat, like while I'm filming, going like, good job. Yeah, you can do it. You can do it. And it took off. It just completely took off. It was funny because I was doing it for a few months, and I wasn't really getting many subscribers or views. I was trying really, really hard to be professional and like, very, buttoned up. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And I was like, no one's watching these. I'm just going to be myself. And I started being myself, which, I have a bit of a potty mouth, and I'm very straightforward and direct. And I like to crack jokes. You have a great
pizza outfit as well.
Yes, I have a good pizza outfit. But yeah, so I started doing that, just being myself, and literally overnight, the channel skyrocketed. And I remember finding out while I was at my sister's bachelorette party in Disneyland, and we're all wearing like the little bachelorette tutus for each Disney princess. And we're in line for the Toy Story ride. And I'm just looking at my phone as my subscribers go from like 85 to 7,000 something. And I'm just on my phone staring, and I don't want to take away from my sister's bachelorette party. So I'm just like, yeah, but you're like, I'm freaking out by myself, and everyone else is like, you're getting married. And I'm just like, what is happening to my channel? But yeah, it just exploded overnight. And now I'm at just shy of 300,000 subscribers.
Yeah. So because I think I came in to watching your channel. You were about, I don't know, you're 10 years in now, I think, right? Yeah. So I think you were probably like 3 years in when I started watching. But yeah, you were already like the biggest author tuber on the planet at that point, I think.
when I started, AuthorTube wasn't a thing.
Wasn't a thing. Yeah,
there were only 2 other writers on YouTube, and that was part of it. I was like, well, there's a niche that I can fill because there's only 2 other writers here, so I'll just do the thing. And like I said, I really didn't think it would go anywhere. My goal was 100 subscribers, and so it was very much a surprise. I was in Disneyland in the Toy Story ride, going, what is happening?
I'm already there,
right? Like, what is going on? And I will say it's the reason, because I had a large platform by the time my first book came out, it's the reason that I was able to sort of jumpstart my writing career and, sell enough books where I could make it my full-time job, at the start, as opposed to later down the line.
Now, with the excitement, do you remember what video it was that just blew you up?
It was the 9 Weird Habits of Writers, and just talking about, how weird we are. And it's and it's funny because that was also when I experienced like how polarizing like people can be toward women online. And so I'm getting all these comments like, this is so me. And then I'm getting comments like, get back in the kitchen, So it was a lot at once, but it all worked out. And hey, you know what? When trolls leave comments, it boosts me in the algorithm.
Yep,
so
boost out. Yep.
Keep trolling.
Keep trolling. It keeps helping, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when were you able to go full time? I assume it was probably after The Savior's Champion, or was YouTube already pushing you enough for that book, before that book?
Well, I had to quit my job in order to care for my husband. And I would say about a year into his recovery is when he was doing well enough that we were like, okay, I need to look into like a part-time job or something because, wasn't making any money. But it was also a year into his recovery that I released my first book. And like I said, my goal was for it to be like a lucrative hobby. But it actually made enough money where it was making more than the income I would have made as working part-time.
Oh,
so I considered
nice.
Which I did not expect. So I considered the Eve to be like the part-time income. And then once I released my second book, The Savior's Champion, it was full-time income. And that's when I started making more than I made as a stockbroker. So not only were those people wrong that I couldn't make money as a writer, I am making more doing the far-fetched job than I made doing the safe and reliable job. So eat that.
That's accurate. So where did the story for The Savior's Champion come from? Because I want to say I read it about 1.5 years ago. And I also, you've been around, and your Savior's Champion's been around for a while. You were already kicking the romantasy off before the last 2 years. That's all you hear about now is romantic. And you're already going with your second book in the series by that time. Where did that story kind of come from?
Well, my whole life I've been really into old school romantasy movies. So that has always been my inspiration. A lot of people are inspired by what they read, but as a kid, what inspired me to write were these movies that my dad had me watch. So movies like Clash of the Titans, the original, not the remake.
Yeah.
We don't speak of that one. The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Jason and the Argonauts, Princess Bride. Those were, and then if we want to go into not as old movies, things like The Mummy, although that's more like historical, romantic adventure. But still, those were my bread and butter. That's what I always loved. So once I decided to work, before I was working on The Savior's Champion, I was trying to figure out what project I wanted to do next. And like I said, romantasy has always been the vibe. And at the time, it wasn't really a genre. I mean, people talked about fantasy romance, but it wasn't on trend. So I knew that the next project I work on, I wanted it to be half adventure of some kind and half romance, essentially. Ended up settling on fantasy romance. But I do this thing when I listen to music. I call it making mental music videos, where if I really like a song, I'll kind of like imagine a story that plays along to it. Yeah. And I was really into, how ironic, I'm wearing a 9 Inch Nails shirt. I was really into Head Like a Hole by 9 Inch Nails. And I had this whole music video that kind of went with it. with all these men competing in like an underground labyrinth with all these, tricks and things that got them killed, for the affection of a woman, of this redheaded woman who turns out to be evil. And I had this mental music video going on for years every time I'd listen to that song. And I remember just driving around thinking, oh man, I wish that I knew like videography and effects. Like I would love to make this an actual video. And I just remember stopping at a red light and being like, you dumbass, like you're a writer. You could just write it instead. So that's what I did. So I was like, okay, the next book will be, I knew it was going to be adventure and romance. It'll be fantasy romance. And I will turn this mental music video into a book. And I outlined it. Like I had the general outline, not the full detailed outline, but the general outline done in a week. And I started writing it. So, and now romantasy is a huge trend.
Yes, it's the thing to do now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I love that because there are a few certain like story types and tournaments. I don't know why, but like I'm just a sucker for a tournament. You tell me there's a tournament and I'm in it. Like, and I always like to ask authors this too. If you could be like one of your characters, what character would you hope you're like?
I don't know. I write some morally gray characters. I'm like, what if I sat here and was like Kaleo? No. What character would I don't think I'd hope to be like anyone, but I can tell you there is one character that I am a lot alike. And she's not named in The Savior's Champion, but she is named in The Savior's Sister, and that's Masumi. She's the one who this is horrible now that I'm about to say it. She's the one who measured Tobias in the tent and just seemed so over it and was like, let's just get this done. And then when they arrived at the palace, she's like, you guys all stink. You have to take a bath. Like she's just the straight shooter. And so she's the character. And then in The Savior's Sister, she's the same way, just very direct and to the point. And everyone's kind of like, like she's a little bit of a bitch, but like we respect her. I'm like, this is the character that I would be in the series, is the one being like, okay, you guys stink, take a bath. Okay, do this, just bossing everyone around. But yeah, I don't know if there's anyone that I would hope to be like. Even like the good guys are stabby, And...
Okay, so on the flip side of that, who would you hope you're never like in your? Who's the worst of the worst?
I would say Vrondis, who's the main villain, the sovereign. I would hope to never be like him. I mean, it would be easy to say Kaleo, but with Kaleo, there's like some screws loose that I feel like I'm pretty good. Like we're good. I don't think I have to worry about it. And it's not that I have to worry about Vrondis. It's just his issue is more an issue of entitlement. He's grown up a certain way and believes that he has earned and he deserves this sort of recognition that he really doesn't. And I feel like that's less nature and more nurture. So it's more realistic. I feel like at least the way I wrote Vrondis is that's a real life villain that we see all the time in the real world. We see them in politics. We see them throughout history. It's people who think that they're greedy and they think that they've earned this, that they deserve this. So I that's someone that I would never want to be, someone who thinks that they deserve good things and power just for being alive, just for existing.
RA says, what about Eve?
The character I would most want to be like is Percy. He's a socialite. He's an heir to a big company, and he's just so much fun and so sassy, and you just love him. Like everyone loves him. He's just a good time to be around. So that's someone that I would like to be. I would like to be more like, definitely extroverted. So it'd be out of the box for me because I'm definitely an introvert.
Yeah. So how did you balance the romantasy with the fantasy in The Savior's Champion? Because I feel like you did quite a good job.
Thank you.
Of not letting the romance side of it just eat up the fantasy aspect. I feel like you hit a really good balance. Was that something you were just naturally good at, or did you really have to like think about, okay, let's give both sides of the story?
I call it the roller coaster method, where basically if a chapter starts on some kind of low, it ends on a high. And if it starts on a high, it ends on a low. So by that, I mean, if it starts off with anger and fear or sadness, it ends with, kissing or happiness or victory. When you think about it in terms like that, it's kind of easy to not get stuck in one genre for too long. So for example, like if there's going to be, if it's on a low, that might be someone died. That's probably not a romantic event. Someone died, they're sad, but the chapter ends with being comforted by the woman he loves, and that's a high. So kind of paying attention to that. I do that naturally just to avoid kind of repeating the same thing, the same feeling over and over again. Because I've read books like that where it's like, this chapter's a fight scene, and this chapter's a fight scene, and this chapter's a fight scene, and it just gets exhausting. So I naturally try to make sure that I, sort of have an ebb and flow with my chapters, but it also naturally translates to fantasy and romance. Because, for example, if the low of the chapter is that they broke up, then the high could be that now there's a fight scene and he's victorious. So it just kind of happened naturally by following that method. And also, I would pay attention. I color code my chapters, so if I'm noticing a lot of pink is for romance, then I'm like, okay, I need to add some red, which is blood. So it's like, okay, there's some pink here. There's too much pink in the middle. Let's pepper in some red. Like, let's add someone dying here, and that's kind of how I. I've
never thought about it like that. That would be really smart. Because you could just kind of turn it and be like, oh, okay, I need to mix this up because this is way too big of a chunk of just battle or just romance, And
what I had did originally is that I planned all the challenges, but I didn't plan the order or I planned all the challenges and who dies in every challenge. And then it was sort of like a puzzle where I wrote them all on different cards, and I sort of, just rearranged them on my table to try and find the perfect order. So it's like, okay, I know that Garrick is going to die in this challenge. What needs to happen before then so it's not, back-to-back deaths? Okay, well, before Garrick dies, Layla and Tobias are going to have a moment. And so I just kind of rearranged everything until it kind of created a perfect puzzle.
Okay. So because you have, I know you're big on plotting. That's one of your things, especially for beginners. I think actually that is definitely true for beginners. They should plot a lot. Mm-hmm. So between Stephen King, who says he doesn't really plot anything, and Brandon Sanderson, who does 200 pages of plotting, where are you at with yours? Like me, I just do like 12 bullet points, really. And I'm like, okay, these are the major things, and now I need to connect them. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I do it.
I would say I'm like an 8 out of 10. Basically, I know the main things that happen in the book, but they're still, my outlines are pretty long. They're usually about 20 pages. But that's also because I like to, I'll come up with ideas that I have, for example, like dialogue exchanges or, what's going to happen, that leads up to the kiss, things like that. And rather than writing the whole scene out, I will just shove those ideas into the outline. So that's kind of what makes the outline so beefy, is there will be entire streams of dialogue in the outline. But then I'll have a chapter that says they fight, and once I get to that chapter, I have to figure it out. Like, okay, well, they fight isn't very, something bad happens. Like I have chunks in my outline that are just that, and I have to figure it out on the fly. I also kind of like to figure out the arc of the character as I'm writing. Like, I know the events that are going to happen to them, and I like to decide on sort of while I'm in the moment how that event affects them. So like, for example, there's a scene in The Savior's Champion where Tobias fights the giant, and it's the first time he's ever killed anyone. And I hadn't decided when I outlined that how he was going to feel about it. And while I was writing it, I was like, he's kind of enjoying this a little bit. He's taunting the guy. He's kind of having fun with it. And then when Layla asks him about it, he's like, is it bad that I don't feel bad. And that was like an on the fly decision. So I like to plot all the events. I have a lot of conversations figured out because dialogue's my favorite part of writing. But I like to give myself wiggle room to figure out the character's arc, like how the events will change them. And also, random, debacles. They kiss here. Every once in a while, there's just a bad thing happens. And I get to that part of the outline. I'm like, damn it, Jenna, you were supposed to figure this out earlier.
Yeah. Oh, no. Now I'm backed into a corner. Yeah. Yeah. I'm the same way. Like I kind of know how my character is and stuff. But yeah, sometimes you're running through and then you're like, ooh, yeah, this is how they're going to feel about this like, this isn't, oh crap. Now I gotta work on the fly. I love that aspect. And I guess one thing we have to get to, because it's in the thumbnail and we haven't talked about it yet, is how did you become the cyborg queen?
It's a funny story. Well, kind of. I learned eventually. I was diagnosed when I was around 30 that I am autistic. But for a long time, especially with women who are on the autism spectrum, people, there's a reason that I got diagnosed at 30 and not at 4, it's really easy to miss in women. And we usually just get branded as kind of quirky or, not like the other girls. And so all throughout college, I developed a whole range of nicknames that basically revolved around the fact that I'm not emotional like other women, which is just a whole misogynist stereotype, but that's a whole other can of worms to get into. But people were like, Jenna is so direct. She's straightforward. She tells it like it is, and my friends would joke that like, oh yeah, like her emotion card hasn't computed yet. And so, so I got nicknamed Spock, I got nicknamed Vulcan, and I got nicknamed Cyborg because they were like, oh yeah, her heart is mechanical and things like that.
Yeah, and I was the robot. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like Star Trek, so I didn't mind Spock and Vulcan, but I did find the cyborg one a little annoying. So it was kind of just me taking sort of a negative thing and like, okay, well, I'm gonna own it, I'm gonna make it my thing. And I didn't think it would actually I think I joked on my channel when it was new. I was like, I'm a writer and a cyborg, just making a joke with it. I did not expect it to take off. And then it was my readers and subscribers who started calling me the cyborg queen. I saw someone get really mad somewhere, like, how dare she call herself that? I'm like, I didn't make that up. They did. Okay, blame them. But yeah, it just kind of took off. And so now I'm the cyborg queen, and I've taken a negative and made it a royal lineage.
Yeah, I just think that's great. And knowing the story behind it makes it so much better, because it's just like, okay, you're going to make fun of me. Well, I'm just going to roll with it. And that's who I'll be. And,
right.
Can't help what the fans, want to call me.
Right. And they call Cliff the cyborg king. And it's funny because he actually is like a cyborg, because he's got a titanium spine. He has a battery sewn into his butt cheek. I mean, he's got titanium in his legs. Like he is a cyborg. He is half machine. So so it works for him.
So you are known as, like, if you type in book tropes, almost certainly you're going to come to the top of the page on YouTube. How or why did you decide, did you know that the trope videos were going to blow up, or was that just something you're like, I like this, we'll see what happens, I'm going to do it?
I started doing this thing where I would get frustrated with something in the writing industry and I would make a funny video about it. So it was like my way of venting about something, but in a joking way. I did not know that people would enjoy it so much. And so I was like, okay, well, if you want to hear me bitch, I'll keep bitching, So that's kind of how it went. I think the first thing I did was I talked about female character types that I hate and male character types that I hate. And that was just a reaction from reading books and constantly DNFing, because I'm like, why are you writing people like this? And I just talked about the tropes that I was sick of reading. And literally that's all it was I was frustrated, and I was like, I'm gonna make a funny video about it, and they blew up. I think the female stereotype, the female character pet peeves video is still one of my most popular videos of all time. But that was not, it was never YouTube very much was for me was just trial and error and learning along the way, and responding to what the viewers were liking. And so the trope videos, people were really into them. So I'm like, okay, I'll talk about every genre and every trope that I don't like. And it's so funny because they're my most popular videos, but people get so mad too.
Well, that's the best part. Like, you're like, yeah, rile some people up a little bit.
But it's so funny because that level of anger for me, like, it's just like, there are bigger problems in the world. You can't be mad because I don't like the mentor trope in fantasy. Like, it's just a book preference.
Hey,
relax,
I'm there with you. I am not a fan like of the farm boy. Like it has to be done really well nowadays,
right?
Because there's or the chosen one. It's got to be done really well because everybody's tried it now,
right?
But
exactly.
yeah, I'll get pushback, and from the classic fantasy fans, like, that is a classic trope. You cannot dislike this trope.
Well, it's like, that's the thing is, it's like, I don't like Lord of the Rings, but it's classic fantasy. It's fine. It's, people have their preferences. It's fine. If you get mad every time someone doesn't like something you like, your brain's going to explode because people have different preferences. I feel like this is just not something worth being angry about. Like my closest friend, she likes a surprise pregnancy trope. That's my least favorite trope. And we're not here at each other's throats. Like, I'm not there like, why do you like surprise babies? It's like, who cares? She's reading the books, not me. It has no effect on me whatsoever.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, so you've done tropes for almost all genres and almost all situations. And so it's not to lock you into one thing, but what are your 2 favorite tropes of any kind of trope? Doesn't matter what it is. What are your 2 favorites?
Probably, and they're both romance tropes, of course, because I'm a romance writer. Fake dating. I love any kind of like fake dating, fake engagement. I love that stuff. It's the like is it real or is it not? Like, it's the guessing, because they're faking being together, but sometimes they're just so convincing that you as the reader are like,
magic isn't mundane,
right? Are they falling in love now, or is this still fake? It's the guessing. I love that, and I love forbidden romance because my problem with a lot of romance books, and I talk about this on my channel a lot, is books thrive on conflict. And the problem with, and I'm a romance writer, so I'm not hating on the genre, it's my favorite genre, but the problem with romance is that, books thrive on conflict. So a lot of times the conflict is within the romance. It's the 2 people, are conflicted against one another. And sometimes that can get really dicey, and it can, we see a lot of romanticized abuse or romanticized cheating. And if the characters are abusive to one another, I'm not rooting for them to get together.
You're like, why are you together?
Yeah, I'm rooting for them to get therapy. It's not it's not romantic. And if the characters are cheating on each other, it's not romantic. With forbidden romance, the conflict is outside of the relationship. The conflict is that they're not supposed to be together because, one is from this world and the other's from that world, or something. Yeah. So you can write the sweetest romance you want. You can have them be perfect together. You can have them not have any strife except for the occasional argument, So I really like forbidden romance because it's a lot easier to write like a healthy relationship while still including a conflict.
That's my first book right there. It's not a romantasy, but it's a fantasy that has romance in it. And it's the forbidden. They're not supposed to be together, not allowed to be together. It's the best.
Yeah, exactly. So those two are my favorite. And that's why, I'm obviously the Savior's Champion is a forbidden romance. And I'm haven't really talked about this publicly much, but I am dabbling in rom-coms as well. And that is a fake dating rom-com. So you write what you want to read.
All right. And on the inverse, what are the 2 tropes that you hate regardless of genre? What's like the 2 worst tropes?
Oh my God. Okay. I have to only pick 2. It's so much.
Add as many as you want, but okay. I was making it easy, I thought.
I do hate a surprise pregnancy. Just because it's like, this is so awful. It's like babies ruin the story. It's like now there's someone shitting on themselves.
Hard to deal with.
Right. Yeah, it's like, especially because I like reading romance. Like, there's nothing romantic about swollen feet and pooping on the doctor's table. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a romantic situation. The romance is before the baby came. So I don't like a surprise pregnancy, and also I just always think like, wear a condom. Like, come on, like this could have been avoided. So I'm not a fan of that. And this isn't so much. Well, okay. I'm gonna do 3. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I don't
Go,
like an
go.
I don't like an alpha douche. There's lots of he's an alpha, and it's
I
always
like
just
to see
like,
them get beat up.
yeah.
I mean,
It's always that he's just an asshole. Like, he's just a jerk, and I don't want to read a leading guy who sucks. I don't understand the appeal, and I have theories about the kind of people who enjoy that, and the theories boil down to therapy. Oh man. And then the last one, this isn't so much a trope, but it's just something that I hate seeing in romance books, because it's always going to come down to romance, is the romanticized abuse. A lot of people are really into enemies to lovers, which I understand, but I'm always telling people, you don't have to start off with him wringing his future partner's neck. Like, they can hate each other. Does it really have to be physically and sexually violent? Like, we can skip that part. And I'm actually grateful that dark romance is now a genre that exists.
I was just about to ask you, so how do you, if you're not into that, how are you liking this new dark?
Oh no, I don't read it, but I'm grateful it exists, because clearly there's an audience for that, and now there's a label. So I know, so and I'm not trying to yuck someone else's yum. If you're into that, then read that. Like, I'm not, you don't have to like what I like. It's not like that. But I was sick of picking up a book and it turning into that. And I'm just like, God damn it. Like, I wish there was a warning. So now there is a warning. Now I see if a book is labeled dark romance, it's
like,
not for me.
It's going to get weird.
Yeah, so I don't read them. And so I'm glad that the label exists, because clearly there is an audience. I'm not a part of that audience. So now that audience knows what to read, and I know what to avoid. So I'm glad it exists. It's just not for me.
Oh my gosh. All right. So we're closing in on the hour. I don't want to keep you too long. So if you were going to, in a few minutes, give people the best piece of writing advice for beginners, especially, what would it be as far as starting your writing and then deciding to self-publish or to go traditional route?
Oh man. Okay. I have so much advice. I'm like, okay, the best piece. People are not going to like this. People always get mad when I say this, but the best piece of advice I would give is just try outlining. Like, even if it's a skeletal outline, like my closest writing friend, she does skeletal outlines. It's like yours. It's just 10 points and that's it. That's fine. I would just recommend that people give it a shot. That's not to say that if you're a quote unquote pantser and it's working for you, then have at it if it's working for you. It's just the fact that that's not the norm. A majority of writers do need some kind of plan, whether it's minimal or it's, super elaborate. A majority of writers do need some kind of plan. There's a lot of stigma around outlining. People say you're not a real writer unless you just write it on the fly. That's not true. Most authors do go into it with some kind of plan. So don't beat yourself up if pantsing doesn't work for you. You're welcome to give it a shot. But if it doesn't work, and it probably won't, just try an outline. It doesn't ruin the writing experience. It gives you something to look forward to, because I have to finish this scene because in the next scene, I get to kill that character, or this character is going to make out with that character. It gives you something to look forward to. Give it a shot. It doesn't make you less of a writer. It just makes you make fewer mistakes in the writing process.
And I just want to thank you again for coming on. This has been so fun to have you on. And what can we expect from you next on the writing side and on the YouTube side?
I'm still over at my channel, Writing with Jenna Moreci. I took January off of videos because, new year, everything's crazy. And also because I was working on a few book releases, which I'll talk about in a second. But I usually live stream on Mondays, and then I share videos on Wednesdays. Yes, hello. Butters is here. She's like, yeah, hello, thank you. In terms of publishing, my third book in the Savior series, The Savior's Army, will be coming out this year, most likely. I don't have a release date yet, but it should be coming out this year. And I have my second writing craft book, How to Write Romantasy, that is coming out in fall of this year. So if you are into romantasy, if you want to hop in on that trend, I've got the writing craft book for that coming out. It's very helpful and it's very funny. My editor said it was hilarious, and that just made my life. For me, my favorite thing is finding out that the jokes land. So
yeah, and I can't wait for that. And if you want to plug Shut Up and Write the Book.
Yes, that's my first writing craft book, Shut Up and Write the Book. It's behind, oh, wrong side. It's behind me. It's that little, man, that little white book right there. Oh, Butters is like, no, look at me. No, but yeah, that's my first writing craft book, and that's for writers of all genres. It's basically a step-by-step guide to writing your very own novel. I keep it very straightforward. There's lots of jokes. It's funny, and it's helpful. So definitely check it out.
Yeah, if it's anything like your videos, it's going to be hilarious.
Yes, it's very much the same vibe.
Yeah, it's yeah, so if you guys haven't checked out her channel, which I'm sure you have, but if not, definitely check it out. She is the queen of tropes, the queen of cyborgs. She will get you on your path to writing like she did me. Thank you all for watching, and Jenna, thank you for stopping by.
Of course, thank you. It was my pleasure, and I had so much fun, and I guess so did Butters. You had a good time? She had a good nap.